Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, we welcome back our esteemed guest and NFL insider, Eli Hyde. Eli, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to be back.
So, today we're kind of picking up where we last talked to Eli, where we're going to do an end of season NFL review. Last time we did a mid season review. So, today we're going to talk about like how the season finished out, teams that ended up overachieving and underachieving, some of the awards and whether we think that people deserve them or not. Some of the off-season moves that are going to go on, like I think the over/under right now for QBs or teams that have different quarterbacks is 18 in Vegas. So there's a lot of quarterback mobility being predicted, along with some other things like salary cap fluctuations and JJ Watt being released and who he might go to. So we're gonna have a healthy discussion now that the NFL season has officially wrapped up after the Super Bowl last week. And so I figure we can start on just kind of going through the teams that we thought both underachieved and overachieved. Do you have a preference on what you want to start on?
We can talk about overachieved first, I think. If you want to go ahead, lead us off.
Okay, I have quite a few teams that I marked as overachieved, but I'll just throw out some of them and we can get into others later. So, as far as teams that did really well, I have the Dolphins, Titans, and Browns as kind of my three major ones, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with all three of those. The Titans maybe a little less than the other ones. I thought the Titans were kind of set up for a rerun. The downside to their team was obviously their defense this year and the fact that they kind of couldn't play their game towards the end of it. But yeah, I felt like the Titans were set up for success this year. They still definitely, I think winning their division is a big task for them, playing with Indy and then what we thought was going to be Houston. But even still, I thought the Titans were set up for success. The Dolphins, I definitely agree with. They were a team like,
Where the heck did they come from?
yeah, their coaching staff is pretty ridiculous in my opinion. Like I think Brian Flores is definitely a star-studded coach of the future here. He definitely brought like the Patriot way down to Miami with him, and I think they're a team if they can figure out their QB situation, which maybe they don't have to do more with the QB. Maybe Tua is it, or maybe they do need to kind of dip their foot into this QB pool again. I think they're a team that definitely is set up for success in the future. And one of the craziest things about them too is just how young their team is. Like they were just on the outside looking into the playoffs this year, and they had I think I saw somewhere they had the most rookies play out of any team in the NFL this year. So like they're very young, but they're just super well coached. So I definitely see them. They were definitely a team that I was expecting like maybe six wins, probably tie or match what they did last year. But they definitely exceeded expectation. I mean, they were had a chance at their division at one point, kind of fell off. But and then what was the last team you mentioned?
Let's see here. The last team was the Browns.
The Browns. Yep, I can agree with the Browns. I definitely wasn't as high on them to start the season. I just felt like they were another team where all the talent in the world, but they just couldn't get the coach to figure it out, and their coach figured it out. Like they got a solid hire in Stefanski, one coach of the year, obviously. So he did all the right things to get that team where they needed to be. So I would agree with all of those. One of the ones that I put in that might come as a surprise is honestly the Jets. Uh, Even though they're the number two overall pick, they're a team that was expected not to win a game. I don't think they were favored in any games, and they beat two playoff teams that both made it to the divisional round of the playoffs. So
Sure.
the fact that they won those games, they were in a few other games outside of a trash Hail Mary at the end of the Raiders game, outside of a kicked field goal at the end of the first Patriots game. They're a team that could have been picking in between 5 and 10 this year, as opposed to picking in top two. So they're definitely a team that was bad, like very bad, but still overachieved from what I expected out of them.
That's true. Yeah.
Um, Another team that I thought was a little better than expected, the Raiders and the Cardinals are both teams that I thought were both better than what they were probably projected early on, but obviously both fell a little flat towards the end and missed out on playoff opportunities. So
I think the Cardinals into both overachieving and disappointing.
yeah, absolutely. And
Like
I'd
the
say the
Padres
Raiders.
didn't start.
I'd I'd say the Raiders are in the same boat there too, where it's like they had all the pieces. They beat the Chiefs. They were the one of two losses the Chiefs took where Patrick Mahomes and all their starters played. Um, but they rode that high a little too close to the sun, and then they kind of burned out.
I don't ever trust the John Gruden.
No, I know you're not a John Gruden fan, so.
I don't think it was ever a good idea to trade Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper from a team that was 1 year removed from being like 11-5. Like what
And the issue with those moves too is they really haven't done much with the draft capital they've received from it. Like
was
the
Henry Ruggs a guy that they got with one of the picks?
no, I think Henry Ruggs was their original pick last
Oh,
year. The ones I think that they got Josh Jacobs, who Josh Jacobs is a quality pick. He's a quality back, but then again, philosophy around running backs in the league is all dependent on who you ask. I'm not a firm believer in first round running backs. If you look at a lot of the running backs in the league who are very successful, most of them are not first round running backs. I feel like, and I mean, you look at guys like Saquon Barkley, who's a number 2 pick, or Ezekiel Elliott. Saquon's hurt all year. That's a wasted pick already. Zeke's just underperforming after he got paid. It's a wasted top 5 pick. Leonard Fournette went to a new team, obviously balled out, but even still, he wasn't
all year.
Yeah, even still, he wasn't wanted with his original team. It's so hard to value running backs in the league. It's just a position where you can get a lot of the same production out of players like Aaron Jones, who's a 5th-round pick and is a top running back in the league, and he'll be paid probably top money in the league, depending on where he goes, if he stays in Green Bay or if he moves on to somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. It's
Derrick Henry was a 2nd-round pick. Like Derrick Henry is the consensus number 1 running back in the NFL in my opinion, and he's a 2nd-round pick. Heisman Trophy winner went in the 2nd round. So it all depends on how you value that. So he was one of their picks. Cleveland Farrell was their pick from, I think, John Gruden's first year. I don't know. I don't think that was a Bears pick. I think that was just them. And then
Darren Waller was he somehow.
whoever that safety is,
Joseph.
Jonathan Abrams, I think, is he was a pick from the Bears. So quality starting safety, but a physical safety, very much like a Jamal Adams, but a little worse, I would say. So I don't know. They haven't done much with the capital they've received from those trades, and so that's kind of hurt them too.
I also had down this one as one to talk about whether they were overachieving or not. And it's really more particular to the regular season, but I had the Steelers down as a maybe because I sure as heck did not think 12-4 would be their record. I thought it would be like 8-8, but they also did have like the easiest schedule in the league, so it doesn't shock me that they had like double-digit wins. What's your thought on the Steelers?
Yeah, I can agree. They fall under both for me. I didn't expect them to be a 12-win team. I was thinking maybe more of 9-10. Going from Mason Rudolph to Ben Roethlisberger is definitely an upgrade.
Yeah.
The issue with them is, like you mentioned, their lack of a competitive schedule really that helps them out a lot. But they do play in the AFC North, which is one of the more competitive divisions in football. But then you look at the back end of their schedule is once the teams figured them out, they were done. Like their season was all but wrapped after that Washington loss.
Yeah.
And it just kind of went way downhill after that. So they were a team that, like, yeah, they overperformed what I would say my initial expectation was of 9-10 wins, but they played the NFC East, which is arguably one of the worst divisions we've ever seen in football. Like in the history of the NFL, that was one of the worst seasons the division had. And that's why I wouldn't put like the Washington football team in an overachieved, because they played in a division that
Yep.
it was
I had as a maybe.
yeah. So I wouldn't say that any team in the NFC East overperformed. They were definitely a surprise win out of that division. I expected the football team to probably be the last team in that division to come into the playoff picture. But yeah, I'm not going to give a 7-9 team the light of day for overachieving.
So another one that has maybe was the Chargers too. They finished 7-9.
Yeah,
The only reason I said they're possibly an overachiever is like I thought this team would go 4-12. With I think Derwin James was out. I think most of the season, if not the whole season again. And
yeah, I think he had a training camp injury that kind of knocked him out. But yeah, they're a team that kind of they were in a weird spot because they kind of went all in, knowing that they got a new QB. Like they picked up Chris Harris Jr. from the
oh
Browns.
yeah,
They picked him up. They brought in Brian Bulaga at right tackle. Like it seemed like they were trying to put pieces in to make a playoff push, knowing that they didn't have Phillip Rivers, and not really knowing probably what they had in Justin Herbert. But
yeah,
I'd say that with how Justin Herbert performed, they almost underperformed in what they should have been.
yeah,
And I think that's why Anthony Lynn doesn't have a job anymore. Uh, they were definitely a team where I was expecting probably about 7 wins, but with what they had in Justin Herbert, they should have won 10. So in
yeah.
my opinion, they were one of those teams that really underperformed throughout the year, based on the talent they have, and it mostly fell flat due to coaching.
Yeah, those are some good points I hadn't really thought about. But I think my thought of them being an overachiever was I think they were started 2-9 instead of finishing 7-9. I was like, wow, they really came back and pulled themselves up. But in reality, they should have probably never been 2-9. They should have been four
Yeah.
and five at that point.
Well, and you look at some of the losses too. They got absolutely blown out by the Patriots, and the Patriots were a bad team. Like the fact that the Patriots won 7 games at all too is that's quite a feat because they were a bad roster, a
Yeah,
bad team, and they beat the Chargers by like 40. Like
yeah,
it was bad. So that was ultimately the game I think that got Anthony Lynn fired, and then just kind of because they went on a 5-game win streak after that, I'm pretty sure,
yeah.
and
They
then
did.
even still, they're just you can't do that. So yeah, they're a team that I felt kind of underperformed. I thought they could have been a sneaky playoff contender with the way Justin Herbert started out, but they just couldn't find wins early on, and so their season kind of got defined in that way.
That's probably a good bridge to start talking about some teams that got disappointed the most. I'd say. Um, as far as I had two main teams. We already talked about the Cardinals a little bit, but my other two were the Texans, which I think is a consensus, and then the Eagles. Those two were my main two.
Yep, I could agree with both of those. I'd probably throw Dallas in there too, but obviously Dallas losing their starting QB in week 5 really hurts. But they weren't a good team before Dak went down. So I'd say all three of those are very. You could almost just throw the NFC East in total into the disappointing. They that if there was ever a year where a division didn't deserve a team in the playoffs, this was a year, in my opinion. And that division, it was just horrendous. The way that the Eagles season ended was just horrendous. They punted to the football team, and they just yeah, Doug Peterson doesn't deserve a job right now. The Cowboys should have honestly won that division pretty handedly. And even with Andy Dalton, they should have won that division pretty handedly.
Decent quarterback.
Yep, he was a starting level quarterback, and he was a quarterback that led multiple teams to multiple playoff runs.
Yeah,
Obviously, they didn't do anything once they got to the playoffs, but
but
that's just the Marvin Lewis way.
he's a four-time Pro Bowler. Like he's not a bad player.
Exactly. And I even said too, I think I tweeted it out after Dak Prescott went down. I said the Cowboys still have the best QB in the division, like
Yeah,
at a starting level. Carson Wentz was bad. Carson Wentz, I don't know if Carson Wentz will move. I don't know what happened there.
no.
Alex Smith just like can't do anything.
He is like I don't really think he should have won Comeback Player of the Year because frankly, yeah, it's like a nice story that like he isn't like handicapped for the rest of his life, but as an actual football player, he was bad.
Yeah. Well, and I think the cool like The reason he won it is because his team made the playoffs more than anything, even though like how much he did to help them with that, I couldn't
He
tell
only
you.
started like 6 games, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's just no one else who really, I mean, Cam Newton was probably runner up and Cam Newton was really bad. Cam Newton had more interceptions than throwing touchdowns this year. He had more rushing touchdowns than throwing touchdowns this year.
Yeah.
It's just, it was a bad year overall for the comeback player position.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know who really deserved it, but
Yeah, there wasn't really anybody, and I think he just liked his narrative.
yeah. Because like in years past, you look at like past winners, and it's guys who come back from injuries and they just play out of their mind. Like the
Yeah.
one I can think of because it's close to home is Jordy Nelson winning it in 2016. He tore his ACL 2015, comes back, he catches 13 touchdowns, goes for over 1,000 yards. Like that's a comeback player of the year. Like that's a guy who was out all the last year and came back, and he was a huge impact on the team. This year there wasn't one of those.
Yeah.
No. I don't know if there's a defensive player really who came back from an injury and balled out or not, but
Yeah, not really.
so
But the Eagles, man, I actually think that there's still a good team in there somewhere. I think they finished 5-10-1. Um, they did look decent when Hurts was in the games, and it seemed like Doug Peterson just doesn't like Carson Wentz or something, because every time he's gotten an opportunity to replace him, it seems like he has. Like anytime Nick Foles is on the roster, it seems like, okay, let's put him in over Wentz, and he just seems like he's chomping at the bit to get rid of him. And I would have been curious to see what this team would have done in the future had Wentz left and Peterson stayed. Obviously, we won't ever see it, but
yeah.
I just think a head coach who leads it to a Super Bowl has. I just think that team was more reliant on him than Wentz, so I find it interesting that it seems like they've chosen Wentz over Peterson.
Yeah, and I think the main issue with that is just Wentz's contract. Like he has a tough contract to eat, especially in a year where the cap is dropping by 25 million. Like it's just his, because I'm pretty sure from what I've heard his salary cap hit this year is in the upper 20s or something like that. And I could be wrong about that. I don't remember exactly what the number is, but it's an astronomical amount of money. And then his salary cap hit next year is even higher. So the dead cap money from dropping his deal, it's very tough to swallow. And I think Doug Peterson, more than anything, just lost the respect of the locker room, because you have players like Jason Kelsey the week before talking about how you play no matter what, you're playing to win. You don't play to see what you have or for draft position. Players play to win. Players don't play to, because they don't give a crap about who they're drafting. Like the season's not done. And then the next week, Doug Peterson goes and basically plays for draft position. So it's his players lost a lot of respect for him. I heard players wanted to fight Doug Peterson on the sideline. Like
Oh
there
my
was
gosh.
there was a whole lot of drama surrounding all the stuff that happened with the Eagles at the end of the year. So I don't know. I think they were just a team that they just couldn't ever hit their stride when they needed to. The division was theirs literally all year, and they just could never eke out the wins they needed to get into the final dance.
I thought it was gonna be a repeat of exactly like last year. Like they finished like 9-7, barely get in. Obviously, we know they're a bad team, or like relatively speaking, for a playoff team, that they'd be bad and they'd just lose in the first round. But I don't know what the difference was in Wentz. Like he honestly, even last year and the year before, when people were still saying he wasn't himself, like his numbers were still good,
Yeah.
and he was like the reason they were making the playoffs. And now this year, he just wasn't that dude. And I don't even know who, on offense, they just are so bad. And defensively, I think, between Fletcher Cox and a lot of those other dudes, like I think they still have like Malik Jackson and Brandon Graham. Like that is such a good front defensive line. I don't get how this team was as bad as it was.
Yeah, they're just a team that just kind of like they self imploded. I mean, Carson went. The issue with the Eagles is that for one, they can never keep. I mean, their roster is all like college level wide receivers who just like
Yeah.
are on the street. I mean, they're grabbing people off the street to fucking come play wide receiver for their team, and it's just like, I mean, people talk about a lot about how Carson Wentz just can't get a connection with receivers because it's a carousel of receivers coming in and out every week. So it's hard to build that chemistry with them and all that. But even still, I mean, he was just bad. He wasn't feeling pressure the way he had in the past. He wasn't moving the way he had in the past. Definitely wasn't throwing the ball the way he had in the past. And it's just it all kind of it all self imploded. And now they're a team that's way over the cap. They're gonna really struggle to draw any players in. I don't know anything about who their head coach is. They just hired the
Yeah, that one dude, like Nick something. He
Nick
looks
Sirianni or
like a gooseball. Like,
yeah,
he looks like he didn't take a shower in his press conference. It's like, come on, man.
yeah. He I don't know. It's just overall that team is just kind of it's gonna be dysfunction. I mean, I think the Eagles they're heading for a rude awakening post Super Bowl world in Philadelphia. But
Who
yeah,
was
I
the
mean,
corner? Oh, Darius Slay. I was trying to think of the guy that they brought in to be like with that. I thought, okay, they're gonna like lock down the division, bringing in like arguably a top 10, even top 5 corner in some people's eyes.
yeah,
I thought that the Deshaun Jackson acquisition was gonna be really good. I was obviously really wrong. Was he on the team in 2019 too? Was he been on the team for 2 years? I think so, right?
I think so. I know he hasn't done anything since he's been back there really. His whole NFL journey is very strange to me. He was very very big his first 2 years, and then just ever since it seems like you get once every 3 or 4 weeks you get a big Deshaun Jackson play, and then everyone's like, "Oh, he's really good," and it's like, no, he's really not.
I think
Like,
between 2019 and 2020, him and Alshon Jeffrey are supposed to be like the 1 and 2, or Alshon Jeffrey being the 1 and Jackson being the 2, and they played like a combined 10 games.
yeah,
So from that perspective, I can't ding the offense too much when like Arcia Whitehead or whatever his name is like their number 1 target throughout the season at wide receiver. But it's like, come on, you can sign Brandon Marshall even and see what he does off the scrap
yeah,
heap or somebody else. Like, come on, guys. These You can get a bunch of vets on minimums. Antonio Brown was right out there, and they were like, I know nobody wanted to touch him, but they could have gone out and done some things to try and improve the offense that they just for some reason didn't do.
yeah. And I don't really get it. None of it makes sense to me. They couldn't figure it out. Doug Peterson wasn't willing to adjust either. They weren't a good passing team, and you have a decent running back. Like Miles Sanders is a good running back. Corey Clements, not a bad number 2 or number 3. Like they had running backs, but they just refused to run the ball. And it's like, okay, so you're not going to play to your strength. You're going to play heavily into your weakness because you don't have consistent wide receivers. I mean, Travis Fulgham was their best wide receiver, and he got cut by both the Lions and the Packers this year. So if you're cut by the Lions and then,
Yeah,
you know,
know.
and I mean, he had a great year, don't get me wrong, but like it's not a good quality.
Yeah.
He's not going to boost your team.
Or even when you think about like just organizationally, they come off of the Super Bowl and like who was the primary back that year? It was Jay Ajayi who had his like career season, and then they decided then like, hey, we're not going to bring you back.
Right.
There was one other dude I'm thinking of who
They
was
had LeGarrette Blount that year. They had
no,
Corey.
they didn't bring him back.
Yep. It was
They
just strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that whole division was just very underwhelming this year from the start too. Like you knew that it was going to be a bad division from the start. Um,
I was very much cheering for the Giants in Week 17
yep.
and for the Redskins to or Washington to lose
Mhm.
because man, I wanted to see a 6-10 team get in the playoffs just to make history to say that's the first 6-win team to ever make the playoffs.
Yeah, I was pulling for that myself. And then Doug Peterson doing what he did. I was just like, well, this sucks. You ruined it for everyone.
Yep.
But oh well. So
Yeah. So, and then the one that probably everybody can agree on and probably might be the most disappointing team of any is the Texans.
by
4
far,
12, coming off what I think was an 11-win season last year or 10. I don't remember which, but There's more going on than just DeAndre Hopkins leaving. He's not worth 6 wins by
No,
himself. I don't get it. I don't get it.
yeah, just overall, like, I mean, the team's bad. Like, the team was just honestly, they were very bad. Um, they they put a lot of pull into getting the same receivers instead of like diversifying their wide receiving core. They brought in a bunch of short, speedy guys who are supposed to take the top off, and then you hit the under routes, and it didn't work. Like, their wide receiving core is Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, like, and then a bunch of, yeah, and then a bunch of nobodies. You have no one who can win jump balls. You have no one who can win, outside of just vertical running. And it's like, well, that hurts your team a lot when you don't have a good route runner on your team, or you don't have someone who can win those 50-50 balls like DeAndre used to be able to. Like, it just, their team fell apart. And then getting rid of DeAndre for basically a scrap heap and an older David Johnson who didn't do anything for the team this year, it just really hurt them overall. And now their team is they're in rebuild mode now. They went from being a 24 lead on the eventual Super Bowl champions to now everyone wanting out, including JJ Watt, DeAndre Hopkins already out. Deshaun Watson's probably not going to play there. Like, it's just, there's a whole lot going on in Houston.
Yeah, man, I actually liked this team a lot when they were an actual good contender. Like, I liked the defense with Watt and Merciless, and before I think he's done in the league now, but he's one of these dudes that you're not sure if he's retired or he's just been injured every year for 5 years. With Brian Cushing, I
Yeah.
liked him a lot when he played. Um, Jonathan Joseph, even though he's like 100 years old, is still a decent corner.
Yep.
I don't know. I like they had the Honey Badger too before they gave him up for like nothing.
Yep.
In the city, this team just had the potential to be like a perennial 11, 12 win team, and there must have been something more going on between that Hopkins trade than just wanting a second round pick in David Johnson. And I think it was even more than like disliking like him and Bill O'Brien. There was more to it than that, I think, even.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not like the owners would have let that happen ever. There must have been some like organization wide rift going on to let that happen.
And I mean, I think they're the best case study too. Like, everyone's always said, you get the elite quarterback, your team's inevitably gonna win. They were the best case study in proving that that is not the case. They have an elite level quarterback. They have one of the best in the league in their quarterback, who had a crazy good year too. And that's gonna be like, if they're if they're a playoff team, he's getting looked at for MVP votes. Like, he had that good of a year, and it all went under the rug because they were so bad this year that it didn't matter. And so that just goes to show you, like, you can have an elite quarterback, but if you have nothing else around him, you're not going anywhere. And everyone always was under the impression, like, well, once you have the quarterback position figured out, everything else will figure itself out. And Houston just proved that that is not the case, and that's why now they want Deshaun Watson wants out.
Is he still on? I'm trying to remember. Is he still on his rookie deal?
No, they extended him just before the beginning of this last season.
Okay.
So they gave.
I mean, we may have talked about this before, but it's always like you got to try and win when that quarterback is on his rookie deal.
Yep.
The Seattle Russ Super Bowl and a lot of others, but like,
I mean,
once that quarterback starts making the 30+ million, it's hard.
Yep. Even Patrick Mahomes, like, the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs figured it out. They extended all the guys they needed to. They got their first Super Bowl with Mahomes on his rookie deal. They obviously gave him the historic contract, the 10-year, $500 million contract.
Yeah.
And they're still able to maintain a lot of other players. They still extended Kelsey. I'm sure Tyreek Hill can probably still make some money if he wants to stay there. The Chiefs have a good foundation, and yeah, they did what they needed to do. They won before their quarterback was off his rookie deal. I think the Texans thought that they had a chance at that, and they missed. Like, I mean, but it's that's how the league works. Only one team wins. So it's a tough thing to swallow, but I'll be interested. I'll be interested in seeing where that all goes.
Yeah, even Kansas City, I'll a lot of people want to ride this train of like, well, they'll make the Super Bowl like 6 times in the next 8 years or something like that. I I'll be really interested to see how that defense holds up once they have very limited money.
It feels far fetched. I mean, like, yeah, you even look at the Super Bowl this year. Like
Yeah,
them losing was a result of one, their O line being just absolutely decimated. They had a second string O line going against one of the best front sevens in the league, arguably the best front seven in the league.
yeah,
And then, yeah, their defense wasn't able to stop them. Like I mean, Tampa Bay was built for that. Like that is exactly how Tampa Bay wanted to play. Like they wanted all the big named receivers because you can't double everyone. You can't double Mike Evans and then leave Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin one on one. You can't double either of them and then leave Mike Evans one on one. And they found their running game at the end of the year. Like that is Tampa Bay. That's the reason they won. Like their defense won them that Super Bowl, and Tom Brady was able to do what he needed to. You know.
yeah. Don't get me going on that train about quarterbacks getting credit for Super Bowls they didn't
Oh,
deserve. Let's talk about Super Bowl 50 and Peyton Manning for a second.
I'm right there with you, man. I mean, your defense allows 9 points to the number one offense in the league, and Tom Brady's getting a lot of credit for that. I
I think
disagree.
there's some stat about like, and I'm not gonna have it exact. So if anybody like gets angry at me who watches this, I'm sorry, but it's something like Brady. Anytime he's ever won a Super Bowl, has like had a top 6 defense or better. I feel like it is. And like, yeah, you look at the ways that they have won any given time. When they beat the greatest show on turf, which is considered like the greatest offense in NFL history, it's because they held them to 14 points, which nobody ever thought could be done. And when the year when they had the greatest offense in NFL history, '07, they lose the Super Bowl. It's like ultimately defense does win
Yep.
championships.
Well, and you look at too Brady's last two Super Bowl wins. His defense hasn't allowed a touchdown. They've allowed a combined 12 points in the last two Super Bowls he's been in, and
Yep.
his offense has now scored 44.
Yeah.
Like that's winning. That's how you win. Defense is going to win you a Super Bowl unless it's two just very competitive offenses against two subpar defenses. But when you have a defense like Tampa Bay's, it'll get you over that hump.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. Deshaun, kind of wrapping it back into the Texans, Deshaun Watson, now that he's on this max contract, I
Mhm.
know that he's going to be attractive to a lot of teams, but like we're saying with these other teams that win Super Bowls via defense, I would be slightly skeptical if I was some of these teams. Do you really want to pay Deshaun Watson like what 35 million going forward every year? That's a heavy price to pay for a dude who's proven he can't single-handedly win you games. Like, can really anybody besides Patrick Mahomes? I don't know. And even
Yeah,
Mahomes, clearly he's not invincible anymore. It shows. So
exactly. Yeah, and like I mean, that's kind of been the discussion. For a long time, it's the belief that like yeah, if you have a Mahomes, you have a Rodgers, you have a Brady, you have a Manning, you're in the playoff picture no matter what, and you're vying for a Super Bowl every year. If you look at Rodgers' whole career, his whole career has been derailed by the fact that he's never been able to consistently have a defense that doesn't allow over or less than 28 points in a playoff game. I mean, his defenses simply just let him down when it comes to playoff time. And now Rodgers is at fault for a few games, like that by no means is like saying Rodgers hasn't had his fair share of blunders, but like you look at the way the Packers tend to lose in the playoffs, it's they're scoring 32 and everyone else is scoring 45. It's just like that's just how it goes. And so this year it's just this whole year was a really interesting case study in a multiple different facets. Like it shows that yeah, defenses are still the way to build. I'd say defense is going to be your way to build, even with how strong the offense in the league is. Like they gear the game towards offense when it comes down to it. Like the reason teams win is because their defense gets stops. And you can have the best offense in the world. And if the defense stops you a couple of times and offense scores on your defense, then that's it. So
Yeah, when you think about the one time the Packers won the Super Bowl in the last decade, what they had the I don't know if it was the number one or number two defense, but it's they had a strong defense, and the score was like what 26-17 in the Super Bowl. They held the Steelers to 17 points, who had a very good.
Yeah, they won their 2010 Super Bowl 31-25, and I mean, but if you look at the big scores in that game too, there was a pick six in that game. Nick Collins scored a pick six. Clay Matthews got a strip sack, or he got a fumble on a running back, like a run play. He forced a fumble on, I think it's Hightower. I can't remember his name. But those are the plays that inevitably like result in wins. Aaron Rodgers played out of his mind in that game. Like that is one of Aaron Rodgers' best games ever as a player, was that Super Bowl game. And you look at any quarterback performance in the Super Bowl, his is towards the top with how he played. And even still, it came down to 6 points, and it came down to a few stops on the defensive side. And that's how you win games. Like that's where the games are won.
And the Texans aren't getting any closer having released J.J. Watt now.
No. And to be fair, like that's a mutual parting. I mean, J.J. Watt isn't the player he was 5-6 years ago. Obviously,
Yeah.
like when he was on his stint of Defensive Player of the Years, and people are saying like this might be the best defensive player we've ever seen. Like, yeah, he's not that anymore, but he's still. I mean, he still has the name. He still plays, and he played all 16 games this year, which is far and away better than his last 2 seasons, where he was on IR for the vast majority of both those years. I mean, he's not the game wrecker he once was, but like any team that gets him, he's a guy who's still going to demand double teams. He's a guy that's still going to demand that you watch him on the film. Like he's a player that any team's going to be, when a team gets him, they're going to be lucky to get him, because he's still JJ Watt. I mean, he's still a quality player.
A good comparison for him right now is like think about Julius Peppers on the Panthers versus Julius Peppers on the Bears and the Packers. I think he's starting to be in that Bears Packers stage of his career, but still a very effective, impactful player, just not like the best defensive lineman in the league anymore.
Exactly. But he doesn't need to be that anymore. Like, I mean, his suit's already fitted in Canton. Like he's going to be in the Hall of Fame without a doubt. Like there's nobody who's questioning whether or not JJ Watt will make the Hall of Fame. His thing now is he needs a ring. So he's going to go to a team that's competitive, and I don't know what kind of money he's going to demand. I don't know how veteran players are going to be able to demand what they think their value is this year, just because simply teams that are competitive this year can't afford to pay high veteran salaries. They just like can't. You're going to see that all throughout the league, that they're quality name veterans who are going to be in the free agency market simply due to the fact that their contract couldn't be maintained for the team they're on. Every team in the league is going to do it. And JJ Watt's like the first big name player to go on that market. I mean, you already look, AJ Boye is on the market. Patrick Peterson's going to be on the market. Richard Sherman's going to be on the market. Like these are big name players who, granted, they're a bit older, but they're still Pro Bowl level players. They're still players who are difference makers on a team, and any team is going to be excited to get these players, even with how old they are. The big issue is going to be how much are these players getting paid, because it's going to be a whole lot of vet minimum deals, I think. And so, yeah, JJ Watt might still think he's worth $15 million a year. Teams aren't going to be competitive teams aren't going to be able to pay him 15 mil. If he wants that kind of money, he's going to go to a team like the Jets or the Jaguars, or some team that's not in salary cap hell, that is actually still going to be competitive this year.
I think everybody is going to look at Tampa Bay. I mean, when I say everybody, I'm talking about like the players themselves. I think they're going to look and say, okay, this is a team that brought in Leonard Fournette on next to nothing, brought in Gronk on next to nothing, brought in Antonio Brown on next to nothing, and those were their best tight end in the Super Bowl. They're arguably their best receiver and their best running back in the Super Bowl, and throughout different stretches of the season, they all had their different contributions. But I think a lot of players are going to say like, hey, why can't, it's not exact because you're not going to say, why can't I be the guy catching the ball if it's JJ Watt? But
right,
maybe he says, okay, I can go to a team that was 12-4. I can play with my brother, and I can be a minimum deal guy for 1 year in Pittsburgh, win a ring, and then go out and get 13 million a year, maybe after the cap goes up again in a team that's decent but not like ready to win it all. Same thing with those other guys, Patrick Peterson, Richard Sherman. Any given team can always use, or AJ Boye. Any given team can always use an extra corner that's really good, and so it's never a bad thing just to say like, oh, our number two guy is going to be our number three because now we have Richard Sherman. So I think they'll just pick whichever team looks good to them. That's like a division winner from last year, and go there and see if they can win a Super Bowl.
Well, and yeah, I think that's kind of where I think that's where a lot of players are going to be is, and that's mostly going to be due to the fact that that's where they're going to be forced to be if they want to play for good teams. So it depends on kind of what their value is. Like for some of these players, like JJ Watt, I feel like his whole opinion on the league is going to be, well, I need a ring. Like that's the one. I have money, I have endorsement deals. If he were to come to Green Bay, dude, like he's not paying for anything. Like everyone is going to want a piece of JJ Watt. Like every single company in this state would want a piece of JJ Watt on the Packers. Like that's just how it is. So like it really depends on kind of what they view is important to them. The big thing with JJ Watt too though is he's a 32-year-old edge defender. How many edge defenders play into their late 30s? Very few. So it's like it kind of boils down to, well, do I want to take vet minimum, go to Green Bay, have a decent chance at winning or at least making a Super Bowl, or I want to go to a team like the Jets and get my money, like it all depends on kind of how players view what they're worth and what they deserve. And, that's going to be the tough thing about this free agent market with the salary cap dropping as much as it is it's like, yeah, these guys know that like they're worth this much, but teams aren't going to be able to pay you that much. They just can't afford to, especially with all the money that's surrounding these quarterbacks now. I mean, quarterbacks are taking up a quarter of the salary now at this point.
Yeah.
It's astronomical what like the impact of the salary cap dropping is, and it's going to affect every team differently. So
Yeah, definitely. And it'll be interesting. Some of these fringe guys, like some of them line up really well. Like Patrick Sherman, he's from California. Obviously, he's from more of the northern rather than southern, but he's done his thing in San Francisco. Maybe he wants to continue that California thing, and he just says, "I'll go to the Rams and be like the number 2 or 3 corner behind Ramsey," or maybe
right.
Peterson says, "I'll go back to Louisiana and play a year on the Saints as like the number 2 corner and see how that goes for the minimum, and then go out and set my market after that."
Right. Yeah, and so that's really, I mean, that's where the free agency is going to be. There's going to be a ton of movement this year in terms of you're going to see a lot of veteran names on the market. And the big issue with this year is that those veterans are either going to have to say, I have to take less if I want to be competitive, or I have to get my money and play for bad teams. And that's really like, so it's going to be a really interesting offseason in terms of you're going to like, there's going to be a lot of big name players on the free agency market just because they have cap hits that teams can't afford with where the market's at, where the salary cap's at, and all that stuff. So it'll be. I'm excited. I'm curious to see kind of where players are going, and the big movers are going to be the quarterbacks too. Like we kind of discussed in the beginning. There's expected to be this big carousel of quarterbacks, and I mean, there's already been some movement with the Matt Stafford and Jared Goff trade, which you just very rarely, obviously there's picks involved in that as well, but you very rarely see a QB for QB trade. I feel like that's not very common. But
Let's get into the QB stuff overall, and I wanted to ask you, who do you think won the trade between Los Angeles and Detroit?
probably Detroit, if I'm being honest.
I agree.
Because so the thing with the thing with that trade, and I mean, I know some people have discussed it. Some people don't understand how that trade went down and like why it went down the way it did. The reason that Matt Stafford is worth those 2 first-round picks is because the Lions are eating the Jared Goff contract. Like the picks are compensation to the Lions for taking on the Jared Goff contract, not necessarily for what Matt Stafford is valued at. Yeah. And that's where there's a big disparity in how that deal works. Is it's not people think, oh, the Rams traded 2 first-round picks for Matt Stafford, and it's like, no, the Rams traded 2 first-round picks so that they could get Jared Goff off the books, and Matt Stafford just happens to be a good quality replacement for that. And so, do I think the Rams are better with Matt Stafford? Probably. Do I think that they're now all of a sudden Super Bowl favorites? No. I don't think their team gets significantly better with Matt Stafford over Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is a player who just didn't fit with Sean McVay, and Sean McVay basically runs that team. And so I'll be curious to see how the Rams are this year. I mean, they were 2 wins away from the Super Bowl. Obviously, ran into a buzzsaw in Green Bay, and I mean, they rode that defense pretty much to the. I mean, they upset Seattle in Seattle, which was a big surprise to me. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Matt Stafford makes them that much better compared to what Jared Goff was giving them. But you know,
I think, maybe they go from like 10-6 to 11-5, but I honestly don't think that there's this big margin between the two players. I think a lot of people would say like, "Oh, Jared Goff's a terrible fit in McVay's offense," and like it's such an upgrade. To me, Jared Goff's a decent player. Like I look at a lot of different dudes. I was trying to think of who would I say is a good comp for Jared Goff, who maybe played in like the 2000s or like even earlier this decade. And I was thinking a lot, and I said he feels a lot like Tony Romo to me.
yeah,
Where and Tony Romo has gotten way overrated now because he's an announcer and like people think, oh, should he be in the Hall of Fame? Definitely not. But
no,
he's
absolutely.
he's never. I don't think he ever made an All Pro team even, or he made one in his career. But Jared Goff feels like this dude that's going to give you 30 touchdowns and 18 interceptions every year, and that's good enough to be a starter, not good enough to probably get All Pro team, maybe a Pro Bowl because Pro Bowl works so
Yep.
loosey goosey. But I don't think he's a bad player. Matt Stafford, he's been wildly inconsistent at different points of his career. He's kind of done the carry job the past 2 years, but even the years when they've been set up to be a good playoff team, they sometimes finish 7-9, and you're looking at Stafford finishing the year with like 27 touchdowns and like 19, 20 picks, and you're like, what's going on here? You're supposed to be the number one overall pick, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Detroit definitely wins the trade in that. I think they're getting 90% of Stafford with 2 first-round picks.
Yep. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like I think Stafford is a tier above Jared Goff. Like don't get me wrong, but Detroit's not planning to win games. Like Detroit's plan isn't to be like Detroit didn't do this trade thinking, yeah, now we're set up to make a deep push next year. Like Detroit knows it's in a full rebuild. They just hired on this new eccentric head coach who he's a real character, it seems like. But I mean, they know that they're setting up for the future. Their plan isn't to be like we're in a win now mode. Whereas you look at the Rams, and every year the Rams are in, well, we need to win now because the way they're paying players, they need to. Like they have Aaron Donald, they have Jalen Ramsey, now they have Matt Stafford. I mean, when they paid Jared Goff, it's like I think what I saw somewhere is like when they paid Jared Goff, Jalen Ramsey, and Aaron Donald, they ate up like 33% of their cap.
Wow.
That's three players eating up a third of your cap. That's quite a bit. So every year you look at the Rams and everyone's like, oh, maybe the Rams should go in on JJ Watt and Richard Sherman. It's like, well, they like have to. They don't have draft picks. Like the Rams haven't picked a player in the first round since Jared Goff. And Jared Goff's been in the league now for 5-6 years. Like
Yeah.
it's they're just a team that completely they throw the draft to the side and they go, okay, who can we pay for premium price and who can we win now with? And that's exactly what they did with Matt Stafford too. They think they're close, like they think they're right in it. Their window is now, and to be honest, they don't win it this year. Their window is closing pretty hard. It's the same thing that the Saints are dealing with right now. Like with the cap going down, the Saints are in trouble with where Drew Brees is at, with where the rest of the team's at. They went all in this year and they didn't they floundered. So
Yeah, Drew Brees because he's a legend. He's kind of get floating into that Peyton Manning at the last year of the. It's not as bad as Peyton Manning last year the Broncos run, but he's closer to a game manager the last
mhm,
2 years than he has been to this dude that wins you the games. He more just doesn't lose games at the end.
exactly. Yep. You look at their playoff loss to Tampa Bay, like he's a big reason they lost that game. Like Tampa Bay got 3 or 4 picks on him and then that's your game, you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
So um but yeah, I mean Detroit, I think Detroit won that trade hands down. because I don't think that Matt Stafford makes the Rams that much better. Like maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Only time will tell. But from initial reaction to it, I was surprised he went to the Rams. But then I look at how the Rams are, and I'm like, I guess I'm a little less shocked.
Yeah.
So
So I came up with a list of, oh, I don't know, it's probably like 15 quarterbacks slash teams. And so before we get into like specific ones, talking about them more in depth, I'm just going to go through and say, does this team slash player play for a different team next season? Or if it's a team, will they have a different quarterback next season?
okay.
And I'll just go through real quick. You could just say yes or no, and then we can pick where we want to go afterwards. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Deshaun Watson. Yes for if he'll change. No for if he'll stay.
I think no.
Aaron Rodgers.
No.
Kirk Cousins.
No.
Garoppolo.
I'd say yes on that one. I think they want. It's hard. That one's tough for me because it's like it could really go either way. But I'll say yeah. I'll say yeah. Garoppolo.
Dak Prescott.
No.
Carson Wentz.
Yes.
New Orleans Saints. Obviously, they have to have a new one. Let's say, will they have somebody besides Jameis Winston as their starter?
Yes.
Okay. The Bears. The Bears. So they won't. Will they have somebody besides Foles or Trubisky?
Yes, I do think they will.
Matt Ryan.
No.
Derek Carr.
No.
The Broncos. Anybody besides anybody on the roster right now? Will they have a new?
Yeah, I think yes.
Okay. I guess I put the Colts down too. I guess Jacoby Brissett is the de facto starter right now, but will they bring somebody else in?
Yeah, they'll definitely have someone.
Dolphins.
No.
Jets.
Yes.
And then I put down the Patriots, but I think they're kind of an automatic yes, just because I can't say bring back Newton.
No, they don't.
Okay, so those are all the teams and players I thought would be interesting, or like the main ones I thought about as far as QB mobility, or at least there have been like some headlines about or some sort of rumor out there at some point. Which one catches your eye to talk about first?
So I mean, if you kind of want to go down them a little bit, so the reason I say no for Deshaun Watson is I think the Texans are pretty set on not dishing him. The only way Deshaun Watson is not a Texan next year is if he holds out, and the Texans feel like, well, we can get something for him, so we might as well ship him. I don't think the Texans want to lose him, even though I think it'd be beneficial for both sides to part ways. That's my opinion on Deshaun Watson. But I think the Texans are just kind of so sold on him that they just gave him his contract. Like they gave him a contract literally 6 months ago. So they're obviously like, well, no, we don't want to get rid of you. Like we want you here. But it just kind of depends on how that relationship is between the two of them. So that's really my opinion on Deshaun Watson. I don't know if do you think he'll be?
I think he'll sit out. And I think like this season he'll be under contract on the Texans, but I think they'll move him in the offseason. But I don't think he'll play for the Texans this season. I think he'll pull a Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, I could see that too. And maybe he does a Carson Palmer thing where he like retires and then comes out of retirement or some crud like that. But
yeah. The next one I put down is Rodgers, just because everybody was making a big deal about the I don't know, a lot of guys could move this year, including me, or whatever the quote was. But
no, I think if for some reason Aaron Rodgers wasn't on the Packers next year, I think that would be one of the most incredibly frustrating things a football team could possibly do is move on from a MVP QB a few months removed from said QB. So I'd say if I was putting a percentage on what percent Rodgers is on a different team next year, I'd put it at 0.00001% chance.
Yeah. Kirk Cousins, I put him next to Garoppolo just because I've heard the 49ers said that they wanted Kirk Cousins, which as a Minnesota person, I'm totally happy with that, even if it means having to take on Garoppolo. But
Well, and that's just it too. The Vikings were because they extended Kirk Cousins too before last season. They extended Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins before last season, and now everyone's like, well, now they need to go. Like, I don't know. Like Kirk.
Nobody wanted that Cousins extension. Who is
No.
a fan of the Vikings? I think the general consensus of Rick Spielman in the front office was like, well, we went 10-6. We made the second round. He was a Pro Bowler. He put up like 30-10 TD to INT ratio. So like, are we really going to get anything better? And the truth is like, no. But do you really still want to pay him $32 million this upcoming seasons? No, I'd rather just pay a rookie and take some lumps and put all that money into the defense.
Yeah. And if you're asking me too, if like, do I think the Vikings maybe look for a new QB? Yes, I do think the Vikings either draft a QB or they sign a veteran for cheap. Like because I don't think they're sold on Kirk anymore. Like I just don't. I think most people are kind of at this point where they're like, we know what we have in Kirk in Minnesota, and it's not great. So, and to Kirk's credit, Kirk has played under a different OC in Minnesota every year he's been there. Like that's the same issue Marcus Mariota ran into when he was with the Titans. Like it's hard having all those systems change under you every year, but that goes with being either on a good team or a really bad team, and having an offense that's either really good or really bad. Is you either lose that coach to head coaching or you lose that coach because they're fired. Or in Gary Kubiak's case, he just retires again. You know,
I don't know why, but
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of that too, where it's like, well, Kirk and Jimmy basically swapping spots, and in my opinion, I don't think either team changes with that trade. Like, I think both teams,
like Kirk for Jimmy and a second rounder.
Yeah,
I've heard.
And I just think that both teams are in the exact position they're in now. One team's just a second rounder less, like
exactly.
Jimmy G is just kind of like, he's a game managing QB. He's not an elite QB,
He's Dalton, but when Dalton was in his prime.
Exactly. And also a lot more injury prone. So yeah, I mean, I do think the 49ers maybe look to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think most of that's due to the fact that his contract it makes sense to move on from him now if they were gonna.
Do you buy into the rumors of Jimmy going back to New England at all?
Sure.
I don't get why New England would even want him really though. Like a guy that Belichick's always hung his hat on defense. Why would he bring in a dude who's making 30 plus on quarterback? Like Tom never even really made that when he was in New England.
No. And I don't know. I mean, maybe what's his name? What's our OC's name? Josh McDaniels. Maybe Josh McDaniels is in his ear and he's talking to him about how he can revitalize Jimmy Garoppolo and make him what he was in New England or something like that. I don't know, but I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be on the 49ers next year. He's one player who I wouldn't be surprised if he is, I suppose, but like it makes sense if you're the 49ers and you're not into him, it makes sense to move on from him now. So
if you're Houston and the 49ers offer you Jimmy G and 3 first rounders, would you take it?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're the thing about Watson is like, yeah, maybe he's a top 5 quarterback, but like the market getting set of Goff and 2 firsts for Stafford, it basically makes any other QB trade impossible because we all know that trade is lopsided.
It really inflates it. I mean, and so I guess it kind of depends. Like the Texans got to know no team is going to give you 5 first rounders for a player. I'm not going to mortgage my franchise in terms of 5 first rounders for a quarterback. Like I'm just not. Like I think you know what you have in Watson obviously, but like you're mortgaging your future for one player. So you better be a team that is to a point away from a Super Bowl win if you're going to be willing to give up that much. And you need to know, like, okay, this player is going to make us win a Super Bowl. Like, because if you do kind of what the Vikings did with a fully guaranteed deal to Kirk, then and you don't make a Super Bowl or you don't do that, you end up kind of how they are, where it's like, well, no, we messed up. Like that was our window, and now they can't afford defensive players. They can't afford star wide receivers and stuff like that. So
Another dude I forgot to mention was Russ in Seattle. Do you think he moves at all, or yes or no? Do you think he can move?
I'd probably say no. I think there's been a lot made. There's a lot made in the offseason, and a lot of people take little framings of things that are said and then they turn into a big thing, like exactly like the Aaron Rodgers thing, where Aaron Rodgers says, including myself, I don't know where this team's going to be at. It's just like, well, no player in the league is guaranteed a spot. Like no player is guaranteed this is where you're going to be next year. But then, they make all these headlines of, well, is Aaron Rodgers on his way out? Should Aaron Rodgers demand a trade? Should Aaron Rodgers do this? And every person in the Packers organization who has a say or pull in what the Packers do is saying, we would be so dumb if we moved on from Aaron Rodgers. Like that would be the dumbest possible thing. And people will still be like, well, should Aaron Rodgers demand a trade? And it's like, no. Aaron Rodgers was 6 points away from was 5 points away from a Super Bowl appearance. Aaron Rodgers was potentially 8 yards away from tying an NFC championship game. Like, it's
destination for him where he's better off.
Yeah, there's no team that gets that significantly better and no team that gets significantly worse than the Packers if they move on from Aaron Rodgers. Like the Aaron Rodgers leaving the Packers would become very bad. And I mean, there are some teams that would really benefit from getting Aaron Rodgers, but
I think it's similar for Russ. I think like they go 12-4 with what was a bad defense for most of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Wilson struggled later on in the year, but he played overall like good. He played good.
He had a good season.
I don't think like what else could he want? He's got Metcalf. He's got who's the other receiver on the other side?
Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, Lockett. He's got Josh Gordon whenever he decides to play or is not.
Yeah.
Lots of good tight ends. I think he's pretty much got everything he could want. So like good.
The only thing they're missing is O-line help. And the issue with the Seahawks is they're another team. They just don't draft in the first round for some reason. They trade out of the first round every year. And granted, they're picking later in the first round, but this year I think they're between 21 and 25. I think that's probably where they fall this year, because they lost in the wild card round. And so this is a year where Russell Wilson's made it apparent. He's like, I'm tired of getting hit as much as I have. And that makes sense. He gets hit quite a bit. So get an O-lineman. Like get a good quality tackle. You have a decent tackle in Dwayne Brown on the left side. Get a better right tackle. Just shore up that O-line. And there's going to be free agent linemen out there who they can bring in probably for pretty cheap. And granted, Russell does it to himself a little bit. He's always moving. So it's like, as a lineman, that can be very tough. I mean, there's been plenty of linemen who talk about, well, it's very difficult when your QB is always moving, like, because you have these spots where you plant and then that's where you're supposed to be. And if your QB moves into you and they get sacked, well, that's not really my fault, So
yeah,
not to put it all on Russ, but I mean, he's a mobile quarterback. Mobile quarterbacks get hit. Look at Cam Newton's whole career. He's been getting smoked. And Josh Allen, he's been getting smoked. And it's just, it's the cost of playing as a mobile quarterback. So I don't know. I think he's in Seattle.
Even still, okay, let's say he's upset they don't have a good O-line, but last year, let's say that they reinvested Jamal Adams' money into a good O-lineman. He would have just been saying after the season, well, our defense just isn't good enough. And it's you basically have 4 levels on offense, or I guess there's 5 components to a team, really. I'm not going to count special teams because that's pretty much a coin flip for any team, but you have, or I guess 6. You got I'll count front 7 as one unit. Front 7, secondary, offensive line, skill positions on offense, and quarterback. So 5 levels of a team, and they have 4 of them. So I just feel like he can't get too picky about like,
Exactly.
or we just don't have enough. Well, okay, if you have like one more offensive lineman who is super high priced, you would have been like 14-1 or 15-1 or 14-2 and won the Super Bowl easily. Like you can't have it all with you making like 30 plus wins.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing too. Like players want their money, and it makes sense that players want their money. But then players run into the issue of, well, now we can't afford other things, and
Yeah,
a lot of the times the people that take like the positions they take money out of are going to be your running backs and your linemen, because those are positions where it's just like you can cycle players in there, and you can get players for relatively cheap at those positions. So it depends on where your value is. So.
yeah. So I think Russ stays put though, and I don't
Mhm.
think he should really be coming out and saying like I want this, I want that, or whatever.
Yeah.
How about do you think Wentz goes back to Frank Reich in Indiana?
It seems like that would make sense. I don't
Would,
know,
would,
like,
would the Colts want him? That's another question too.
yeah, and that's where it's tricky. I think Frank Reich probably wants him. He probably thinks like I can revitalize him, get him back to his MVP level. But I mean, is he worth
No.
everything else that comes with it? Like, is Carson Wentz worth a first round pick? Probably not.
Yeah. It's like if I'm Indiana, why go after him when there's a perfectly suitable dude like Matt Ryan sitting on a not very good team who can basically fill that Philip Rivers void but better. You know, he's
Yeah.
younger than Philip Rivers. He's better. I think that that's the move for them. Go out and get Matt Ryan, flip him for like a first round pick, and if you have to give salary cap filler, give that too. But that's
Or even, if you feel like you need a player who you want to get for really cheap, go for Sam Darnold. Like
yeah,
nobody really knows what Sam Darnold is at this point. I feel like still throughout 3 years in the league, he just like there's been no consistency with him. So bring him into Indianapolis, get him away from New York, because it's clear New York isn't the fit for him.
yeah.
Get him into Indianapolis and kind of see what you have in him. I think he'll give you a much better view of what he is in Indianapolis than most other places. What I said at the beginning of the year, knowing that the Jets would be bad and assuming, which it's probably still a safe assumption, that Drew Brees retires, I said he was going to go to New Orleans because I think he's going to be a cheap veteran at the quarterback position that can revitalize his career, similar to how Jameis Winston is doing, Teddy Bridgewater did. Bring him down there for a year and just kind of see what you have in him.
I
So
still believe in Sam Darnold, even if some people don't. I still think he's got talent to be a starting level dude and be pretty good.
because I have him moving on from the Jets. He's the player who I think goes to either Indy or New Orleans, and I think that's where that he plays there. So
And I always found it so stupid when he had that one like really dumb quote that ESPN or whomever blew up when he played like the Patriots on Monday night. He's like, I was seeing ghosts out there.
being ghosts out there, yeah.
Like then everybody was like, is Sam Darnold a bust? Like he can't even like see who the real players are. And it's like,
No,
just relax. He's probably just being an idiot when he said that. He didn't really mean it. So
no,
yeah,
yeah, he's a goofy guy, but he's so young still too. Like he's like 23. Like he came out and he was really young. And so yeah, he's just raw. Like I
wasn't
mean,
it only his second season?
it was his third. This was his third. Yep, because he was in Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen's draft
Yep.
and Lamar Jackson.
How about let's see here. Derek, do you think Derek Carr moves anywhere, or do you think? Because I always feel like I hear these rumblings, like we've heard, like McVay didn't really like Goff. I feel like we hear, but it never really materializes that like Gruden wants to pick his own QB and doesn't want one given to him. So do you think Derek Carr moves by any chance?
No, I think Derek Carr is pretty comfortable with where he's at. I think their offense was fine last year. Like their offense wasn't bad. Their defense was very bad last year. Like that is where their issues lie. And so getting rid of a player can manage your team and can win you games, I don't know why you'd want to move on from that just to say you got your own guy. Like that to me feels silly. Like he's not super expensive at this point. It's really not worth moving on from him. Like he's a bargain player at this point, and You
his
know what he is.
always been good. Like he's
Yeah.
like I've looked at his numbers and he's never had a bad season really. He's
No,
always been good. So yeah,
he,
I think they should definitely keep him.
he's not an elite quarterback. Like he's never going to be Patrick Mahomes and he's never going to be Aaron Rodgers. He's never going to be them. But like he's a guy who can win you games and he can keep you in games and it falls on your defense. They need to just readjust their whole defense, figure that out. And you know what? If you want to move on from Derek Carr in a year or 2 years, go for it. But they're in a good position right now if they can figure their defense out.
Yeah.
That's the reason they missed the playoffs this year.
Hopefully they wise up and fire Gruden soon. Or actually, no, I want them to keep him because I want at the end of the day, I think right now his career record is like one game above 500. I want, when it's all said and done, for the almighty Gruden to have a below 500 coaching record.
That's fair.
So, he's only had like 3 winning seasons in his whole coaching career.
Yeah, I don't get him. Like I don't really get the hype around him. I mean, he's he's been in uh Oakland and now Las Vegas for 3 years. Is he going into his fourth season there?
So let's see here. They were really good in what was that was
2016.
his fourth season, I think, wasn't it? Or
So
his third.
so Jack Del Rio took him to the playoffs in 2016.
Okay, then they were bad in 17,
I
and
think
then
they were bad in 17, and I think so. I think he's going into his fourth year. This was his third year. I don't think they've been above 500 any year he's been there.
no, I believe they were 4-12, or no, the first year they were okay. They were like 6-10 or 7-9. Then last year they've always been like 6-10 or 7-9.
It's really mediocre. They're a team that lives in mediocrity. So
Yeah. Let's see here. I think the Broncos need to just go out and buy a big name quarterback and try and get. I guess if you're looking at the vets out there, Matt Ryan's the main one that people like to talk about. But if I was them, even I would just say who is like a regular starter level quarterback that we can have trust in, like a Garoppolo or Cousins or anybody. Because I don't trust John Elway to draft quarterbacks. He's like the worst quarterback drafter ever. It seems like at this
yeah, he is really bad. Like I don't know. You'd think you'd get at least like a competent level starter throughout like 10 years, but no, he just hasn't.
He drafted Tim Tebow and Paxton. Wait, no. Tebow
Yep,
was
Paxton Lynch.
pick, was he?
Yeah, he was a first rounder.
Tebow was a first rounder and Paxton Lynch was first rounders. People had predicted Tebow to go in the fourth round, and he took him in the first round. Paxton Lynch, I don't even know if I blame him so much, but like he was just one of like 4 dudes around that spot that people were looking at, and he might have just picked the wrong one. But even still, like as this dude who's a general manager, you should be able to spot the good ones from the bad ones at that
Yep.
spot.
I saw Paxton Lynch live. Fun fact. Back in his Memphis days. So yeah, I mean,
I never
John Elway just can't seem to evaluate the quarterback position, and that's frustrating as a team that like feels like they could be close every year, but they're just not.
There were some pundits who were touting Drew Lock as like the answer to this team, and he was going to like be the key to their success. He threw 16 to 15 touchdowns to interceptions this year, and I just thought, what I never got the thing on that dude. He seems like a third string quarterback to me that they're somehow trying to say he's like a franchise QB, and I didn't get that.
I don't know. It's bizarre to me as well. I don't really get it. They got to figure something else out.
If I were them, maybe you throw some 2-3 first rounders the way of Dallas and say give us Dak. I don't know. I don't know what's their solution.
I really don't either. It's a tough market for them.
They were 7-9, but it feels like they're still a team that like doesn't do anything well really to me, besides like having Von Miller and Bradley Chubb.
Yep. And even still, Von Miller was out all last year. Like, I don't know. They're just another team that's very average.
Of the ones we've talked about most things, but the big team that I feel like we haven't talked much about is the Dolphins and the Tua situation and whether they should move on from him or not. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I don't know. So I said no. Like for that, I don't think they move on from him. Um, I don't think Tua falls in line with the same type of quarterback that Josh Rosen was, where the Cardinals move on from him. As well, the Dolphins aren't. I mean, I guess they're picking up the number 3 spot, but like they're not really. There's not really a quarterback there who I can imagine is that much better than Tua is. But I mean, I guess it depends on kind of how the Dolphins view the players that are going 1 and 2. So obviously Trevor Lawrence is number 1. Like that's just going to be a given.
Mhm.
So whether or not they think that if they can get Justin Fields or Zach Wilson at 3, and if they're comparable or better than Tua, maybe they go for that one of them there. But I don't think they really dip their foot into the quarterback market. Maybe if Deshaun, maybe they end up getting Deshaun if the Texans actually do trade him. That's a team that could. If that's the case, obviously Tua's gone. But I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
it'd be weird to kind of get rid of all that capital you have, and there's still a competitive team even with Tua. So why change up that much?
I agree. Like they went 10-6 with him, and basically what felt like no offensive weapons around him.
Right.
And yeah, I just feel like a lot of people I've heard are like, well, if you can move on from Tua, move on from him. And I'm like, what? He was a rookie, and you didn't even start him consistently. Like it seemed like every other game they're like, no, we're gonna put Fitzpatrick in now, and
Yeah.
like, let's just see him do a full 16 games where you actually have not Albert Wilson as like his best receiver.
Exactly. Put some pieces around them. Their defense is good. Like their defense is very good. Put pieces around Tua. Like try to open up the field for him a little bit, make him help him out, and then see what you have. If he's not good next year after you give him some help, then yeah, then move on. Like it's he's
Yeah,
on a rookie deal. It's not like you need to stay tied down to him, but I don't know. I guess it kind of depends on if you can get Deshaun Watson, sure, get Deshaun Watson. You know what you have in Deshaun Watson, so you might as well get him if you can. Make your team that much better. Hopefully, get you over that hump of making the playoffs, and then go from there. Because once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. So, but if you're not going for him, I'd say give it another year.
let's say the Dolphins trade Tua, number 3 pick, and 2 future firsts for Deshaun. Do you think that that makes the Dolphins better than Buffalo? Not in a playoff scenario, but just in the regular season. Like, would they win the division over them?
It's close. It's close. Having Deshaun and Josh Allen in the same division, I think, makes it much more interesting.
I still think Buffalo's the better team, though. I still
Yeah,
think towards
and
them.
I think I might side with Buffalo there. Um, but the tough thing is too, though, is like we don't know what Deshaun looks like with
A competent team.
yeah other players like that.
And then what was the other thing I was thinking of? Oh, if you're Jacksonville and Miami offers you number 3 and Tua for number 1, would you do that?
No,
Yeah.
I'm if I'm Jacksonville, it's Trevor Lawrence no matter what, and I think they've all but like put out that they're keeping the number 1 pick. Like
Yeah.
they like tweeted out about traveling to South Carolina to watch Trevor Lawrence throw at his pro day and stuff like that. Though he did I guess he is going through like a torn labrum surgery. Like it's like a 5 to 6 month thing, but he should be ready for training camp or something like that. So, I mean, I guess if that kind of turns you off a little bit, I don't know. But Trevor Lawrence, I've heard is like people tout him as like the best prospect almost ever. So like if you're Jacksonville, I'd say it's Trevor Lawrence or bust, pretty much.
Yeah. I always get nervous about those, though, don't you? A little bit, where people are
Oh
like,
yeah,
they're the next big thing, because like Jameis Winston was supposed to be the greatest quarterback we ever saw, and yeah,
yeah. I don't know, and yeah, I mean, there's never any guarantee in the NFL. Like maybe Trevor Lawrence gets to the NFL, he just gets hurt once or twice, and then his career is just completely derailed. Like there's a whole lot of like what ifs, but I'd say if I'm the Jags, I'm comfortable in my evaluation. Like Trevor Lawrence is a winner. Like he
Yeah.
pretty much did nothing but win when he was in college. So that's what you have. Um, and so I'm going with him. I'm riding that. I'm riding that wave. They got a college level head coach. Brought him in,
I
make it
think
that
he's a
much
good fit.
make that much easier of a transition from the college level to the pro level for him. I think Jacksonville is setting itself up for Trevor Lawrence and just ride with it.
A trade that I heard, like a trade idea I heard floated was like number one pick and maybe one additional first for Deshaun Watson. I don't think that that is a good trade for really either team, honestly. I mean, it's probably good for Houston, but I don't know why Jacksonville would ever do that deal.
Yeah, and I've heard that too. And the interesting thing about that too is that'd be an interdivisional trade that you're swapping quarterbacks basically. Like
Yeah,
so I just get skeptical about trades that happen within a division. I just don't think a team would be willing to do that. Like Jacksonville doesn't want to make Houston better. So unless they look at Trevor Lawrence and they think, "Oh, he's actually not that good," but maybe Houston doesn't know that for
yeah.
some reason and they think they can like finesse their way out of that. I don't see any reason why that would happen.
And I also think like if let's say the Jacksonville brings in Watson in a trade similar to that somehow, he's gonna feel the same way he feels in Houston right now on this team that has nothing around him. Where what's the upside of that team even with Watson like 6-10?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
I don't see it.
Like they Jacksonville doesn't. There's a reason Jacksonville has the number one overall pick. Like their team doesn't do anything well. They won their first game and then they lost 15 straight games. Like
Yeah,
I mean, they were close in a couple. They that James Robinson. It seems like he's good.
I like him a lot.
They have DJ Chark. They have Josh Allen on defense. Like, yeah, they have pieces. They have Miles Jack on defense. They have pieces, but it's like there's nothing about that team that really like draws you, and it's because they're so young. Like they just have to draft and develop. They're a team that's going to draft and develop, and they'll either stick with their woes of being a poverty franchise, or maybe Trevor Lawrence will boost them into contention. So
I think he'll boost them, much like David Gerard, up to that 7-9 status.
nice, dude.
No, I think he'll be like a Herbert kind of.
I think so too. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be good. I'm always very skeptical about QBs in the draft. Like I'm not a firm believer in rookie QBs. Generally,
Yeah.
if I'm building a model, I'm sitting a QB behind a solid veteran for a while, and that's how I develop. Um,
You're
but
telling me you didn't love when the Bills took EJ Manuel in like 2013?
no, dude, and that whole draft was just
Yeah.
like in terms of QB, that was a bad draft.
Yep. Yeah.
So
That's really I think it as far as the QB carousel. Do
yeah.
you have any other things you wanted to touch on before we wrap?
No, not really. That's good with me.
Cool. Well, thank you. Big thank you to again our NFL insider Eli Hyde. Thanks for providing the insights that we don't really get on a regular day-to-day basis. It's good to hear what the NFL.com thinks straight from the source.
Oh, true that. Yeah. I'll go back to my headquarters and let them know.
Perfect.
So
And
awesome.
I have to do the shout out of our sponsor of the video. Today we have Gary's Balloons. If you want to fly high, fly with Gary. Gary, you should work on that slogan a little bit. But yes, we're sponsored by Gary's Balloons today. Okay. Thanks everybody. Thanks Eli, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thank you.